How's it going, everybody? Thank you for tuning in for part 2 of our ordering system right here. Part 1, if you have not watched it, is actually just a layout of all these widgets so that we have this aesthetic for our application. Check it down on the description. I will put the link in there. You also have the GitHub of this project completed with functionality on my GitHub. So on this video, we're pretty much just going to see the correlation between the menu frame, the menu section, the display section, and the order section. That's what we're doing today. Alright guys, so let's get right to it. The first section in which we're going to add functionality is the menu section. From what you can see on the menu section, I have the display buttons, and that is where we're going to be adding some backend functions so that the state of our GUI app changes. We see that every frame has a display button, and each display button is associated to a dish. Now, another thing that we see here is that we have the initial image. So what happens when I click on, for example, fried calamari? I display it. Okay. So here's the number one thing that is associated with the functions with each display button. Not only did we go from the default image to the dish image, we also did some label configuration and styling. We basically associated a new image to this label, the display frame label, and we also did some label configuration so that we have the title popping up on top of it, which we didn't have in the default application, right? So that's number one. We change the label in the display frame, and we also do some label configuration to have the title above. What else happens? You realize here we have a gray color, and then when we click on it, the color completely changes, showing the user in a more visual way, it's visually pleasing, that they actually selected this dish right here and that they can pay a little bit more attention to the one they selected. And this is something that I was referring to when I was doing the general layout of this application. When I was showing the menu section, I was actually telling you guys that it does seem a little bit tedious to create a frame for only one label and a button for already one whole section. So each one of them have their own frame. But look at how much it enhances the user friendliness of your GUI application and how much it becomes a better experience for your user, right? Is it necessary? Not really. You could also change the background of your label, but you would also have to change the font, and that can confuse some people. But having some type of uniform label and just the background changing does make it a lot easier for your user. And that's the second thing that we do with the display buttons. We change the display frame, the dish frame that is associated on your menu section. Let's get right to it. All right, so we are here inside of our functions region, inside of our main.py. I created a new region, by the way, called display functions. That's where we're going to put all the functions for our display button. But before that, guys, you need to add a new styling configuration, which is going to be the selected dish T frame. And the background is simply the green background that we're going to go from gray all the way to green whenever it's selected. That's what we use in the display frame for a dish. So without further ado, let's actually just get the code for calamari. So I'm going to take this already written code. We're going to copy it and we go right over here. Display calamari. Perfect. What's happening in this function? So this function will take the calamari dish frame and we'll reconfigure it, right? So the relief is going to look a little bit different. This is not really that necessary, but I like to make it sunken because at first, by default, they are actually raised. If you could see it right here, by default, your dish frames are raised, but whenever you're going to select them, I want them to be sunken. So it's like they're sinking in. It's just a little effect. Now you have the style that is associated. Instead of having our dish frame T frame, we are associating it with the selected dish frame. And we have the display label in our display section of our GUI app. What's most important here, to change the image, you need to associate it to a different image object that you created before in the styling video, the general layout video that is part 1, calamari image right here. And the rest is just text, font, foreground, and padding. But the most important one is bottom right here in the compound section. So this compound option, if you haven't seen my labels video or my styling with labels video, basically by associating a bottom here, you're saying that the image, the calamari image, will be displayed below at the bottom of my text that says fried calamari. So without further ado, we go into our button, we put the command display calamari with the callback function, and let's see how that looks. We're going to run the application. What do we got here? Press the button and it's looking very, very nice. So now that we know that this function pretty much works for one of them, how about we simply just create it for the rest of our dishes. So I got right here, I got the function for salmon, sushi, tacos, and it's the same thing, guys. We're just simply using a different frame of our menu section and we're associating it to a different image. So without further ado, let's run the application and let's see what happens. This is my burger and we're gonna reduce our calamari. Okay, things are neat so far. I click on this one, it works. That one works, that one works, that one works, that one works, and that one works. Something's wrong here, right? What is going on? So even though I'm still switching to the correct dishes, what happened here? I still have the same colored frames that are staying. So as soon as I select one, even though I switch to another one, this one doesn't go back to its original gray color. So I want you guys to pause the video right now and try to figure it out on your own. So take a minute to figure this out and then we can go back and see the solution. So I hope you actually gave it a good try and you started debugging and you got frustrated, because that's actually how you learn. But I'll give you guys a solution right now. So in order to fix this and to go back to your gray frame after you have been unselected, you will simply, let me just paste the new code right here. Bam. You will simply just associate the styling of the previous frame, the previous dish frame styling, again on each function. So basically, whenever I select my calamari button, my calamari button will change to the selected dish frame, but all the other frames are going to go back to my default dish frame T frame that I created in my first video, the part 1 video. And that happens with all of them. It's just the simple change that it's a different frame on this scenario. So whenever I select the burger button after selecting the calamari, yes, this one will change color, but at the same time, all the rest, calamari will also change color to its default color, which is the gray one. And that's actually how you counter that little effect of stacking the same color in all frames. So we're gonna go check it out. We're gonna just reduce this region for our display functions and we'll check it out how this is gonna turn out. And we have our fried calamari right here. Once I click on this one, Salmon Wonder, I'm expecting this one to go green, and all of these ones are going to be reconfigured to their default style. Even though this one's already configured to its default style, it doesn't really matter. Nothing really changes, right? Click on that one, and perfect. It went back to its old one. Click on this one again, on this one, on this one, and on that one. And that is it for the first section of our functionality video. We see that basically everything that we wanted to do has been done. We have the label reconfiguration with our new image in front of it and the image being at the bottom of the title of your dish. And you also have the change in frame for user friendliness. Now we move on to the next section in functionality, and we're going to move on to the display section of our overall GUI application. Right here, we're going to focus on the first button, which is add to order. What happens with add to order? So to begin with, in the default GUI application with the following picture, when we click add to order, there's no functionality associated to it. So nothing really happens. No state is changed. However, whenever I'm displaying a certain dish to a client and then that person decides to order it, when I click on add to order, two things happen. You realize that the transaction label will add that dish onto the transaction. And that happens with all of them. It could be any dish that we're choosing. It's just going to be added in there, right? And another thing happens. The total label right below here will actually add up according to the price. So if I click add to order right here, it just added $10 because I order another dish. And that's exactly what happens with add to order. So this button will only change the state of two labels. The transaction label, it will add a dish, and the total label, where it will sum up the total of the dishes that are inside of it and update it as such. So I'm about to display the label transaction update that you get when you click on the add to order button. But before we get to that, we need to add another element inside of our code, and it's this dictionary. The prices dictionary right here actually has all the dishes as the keys and the price associated to them. So this is going to be very useful whenever you're going to be wanting to pretty much manipulate the string that is in the transaction label. So I'm going to show that later on with what we're going to post into our code. To properly display this, we're going to create a new region in my functions. We're going to call it the add to order button. And in here, we're going to create a new method. Now, okay, updating the transaction label. What's happening here is that I'm taking the current order. This is something that I initialize. It's going to be a string. So I take my order transaction label and I get whatever's under the option of text. This is what the cget method actually is used for. So I'm getting the text that is inside of my order transaction label. You use it with labels, by the way. Why am I doing this? It's because if I already have values inside of my transaction label, I don't want to simply delete them when I add my new value of string in there. I want to actually add them together so that I can have everything put together, right? So therefore, I need to store it first in memory. So I'm storing it in the current order string that I create right here. After that, I create another string called added dish. This dish will take the display label text inside of it. So once I get that text, I use this display label as a key. So from what you can see here, I'm casting as a string whatever I use as a key from my display label. I'm actually getting the number that is associated to it, which is actually its price. So what I'm doing here is that I'm taking the display label, adding 4 dots, which is my nomenclature for pricing inside of my transaction label, my transaction label, sorry. And then after that, I use the string that is associated to my display label as a key inside of my prices dictionary. And that will give me a number. So if it's Beach Burger, I'm going to get 14. If it's Salmon Wonder, it's going to be 23. And this is guaranteed to work every time I click on my order button, since these are always written the same way, even on my labels. So once I get that number, that value inside of my dictionary, I turn it into a string. That way I can add it onto my display label cget right here. And then I add the $sign. And last but not least, I take my updated order, which is my current order, and my added dish, and then I reconfigure my order transaction. So let's just go onto our order button, and we're gonna add it into the command option of our widget, which is actually this one right here. Perfect. So we're found our button, we're going to put command and then add, which is the function we just created. And we're going to run our application and see what happens. So now I'm going to display calamari, click on add to order, and there you have it. It's right in front of us. Beach Burger once again, and Salmon Wonder. And that's how basically you're updating the transaction label. The next step is to actually just update the total label. If we go all the way up into my add function, we're going to get over here, right below it, and paste the other chunk of code. So what's happening here? To begin with, just how we stored our order transaction label as string, we're going to store the same thing from our order total label. So we get the text out of that and we put it on order total. However, remember that there's the total space, colon space, and also the $sign in there. So we need to take that out of there, because what we basically want to do is add onto it with the price that we get from the display section, right? So there's price that is associated to every key that we get from the display section. We need to add that price onto the current total that we have right now. So the order total, we're gonna take the text out of our order total label and then use the replace method that is built into Python. So what this does is that it takes one chunk of the string that you have right now and you replace it with something. So I'm gonna take the total space colon space and replace it with nothing. And after that, on top of it, I'm also going to replace the $sign with nothing. Why do I do it in 2 steps? Is because you can't just have more than one in the replace method. I haven't found any resource that says so. If you do, however, just leave it down in the comments. I'd like to see that. But I'm replacing both the total and the colon and also the $sign inside of it. So whatever's remaining inside of it is the number. Then the updated total right here, we cast it into an integer, the order total. So whatever number is remaining, we're going to cast it into an integer, because remember, right now it's just a string. It's basically just text format. So you need to cast it inside of an integer and then add the integer that is associated with your key inside of prices. So imagine my total was 0, and then I take a beach burger, it would be $14. But then after that, I add a fried calamari, it will update to 24 because I'm doing the addition right here by adding 2 integers. And last but not least, you need to update the order total label. So we take the text, we add total space colon space, we cast onto a string the updated total, and then we add the $sign. And we're gonna rerun our application and see how that looks. So if we display this one, we add it over here and we have a $10 sign over here. Excellent. And then we have 24. So this works basically because we're using a dictionary to use to get the prices effectively, but we're also doing a lot of string manipulation. And that's basically the loophole that I'm using in order to manipulate both my transaction label and my total label. And I'm going to use the same thing on the remove function. You're going to see with the remove button. So that's very important. And this is why when I was styling the general configuration of my GUI application, if we look at the transaction label right here, this is why I added a wrap length and an anchor of north and west. Because in my transaction label, if I, for example, I add this to order, I want everything that I'm writing to be on the northwest corner of my label, meaning that it's going to be on the top corner. And I want the wrap length to be 170. And why did I choose 170? It's because the longest order, which is Salmon Wonder, right here, at 170 characters, it moves on to the next line, which allows me to actually go onto the next line for fried calamari, salmon wonder, and then shrimp tacos. So this took a little bit of play. So remember, guys, if you don't really understand wrap length or anchor, which are the two most important elements in the configuration of the transaction label, just check out my playlist about widgets and about styling your labels. So basically, it's the wrap length element that makes them all stack onto one another, and it goes onto the next line and onto the next line, just like this. Because if I didn't have wrap length in here, they would simply just all stack onto one another, and it just wouldn't look nice. And you know what? Just because I want to display it, we're gonna try it out. So I'm gonna run my application, display fried calamari. You see that? This is why wrap length is extremely important in this configuration. So there's another loophole for the functionality of the add button and the transaction label pretty much. Now it's time to actually move on to the remove button. All right, so the next button that we have in the display section is the remove button, and on its functionality it actually reverses exactly what the add to order does, right? It's pretty straightforward, guys. Whatever dish is selected right here, if it is on my transaction, if I click on remove, it actually takes off one dish and not only updates the transaction label but also my total label. So if I decide to remove all of the burgers right here and I keep clicking on it, this definitely does not change because there's no longer any burgers inside of my order. If I remove the fried calamari, you see up there, and that's basically what the remove button is going to do. It's going to update the same two labels that add to order will update. So taking off a dish inside of my transaction and updating the total number inside of the total label. So let's talk about the remove function. So right here, we're just going to take this out of here, and I already pasted the code so that I can explain it to you guys. So right here, what are we doing here? So we want to remove a dish that we get from our display label in the middle of our GUI application, right? So the first step is actually to get that label value. So what I'm doing is that I'm using the display label cget method to get the text inside of there. And I'm adding the 4 dots and the price as well. Pretty much the same manipulation that we did in the add order button, right? So that's our first step. That's done. We got that value in there. And what I want to do is that I want to take the order transaction label, and since it's only one string that is stored as a value in there, I want to turn it into a list. So a list of all the dishes inside of there. That way, if I identify my dish from my label in there and I want to remove it, I can do so easily. So I got to do some string manipulation. So I'm creating this new value called transaction list using order transaction and getting the string inside of it and then splitting it by the $sign. And split method right here is built into Python. And what it does is that you call it right after a string, and what you split it by, you put it inside here between the quotation marks. So right here, I'm splitting everything by the $ and a space. All right. Now I'm taking out the last element of this list that I'm creating here. I will actually explain why. I'm just gonna put this into a comment so that it's gonna be easier to explain as we run the program. But we're gonna get back to this line of code. And right here, what are we checking? If there's a dish to remove in my transaction list, so if the dish to remove right here, the display that I got from my display frame, is actually in my transaction list, then I can move on and do the proper configuration of all my labels. Why do I have this in here? It's probably because at some point you're gonna press the remove button by accident and you realize that there's no fried calamari on the order, so there's no need for it to go there. So if there's no dish to remove on whatever you're presenting to your client in front of you inside of the transaction list, which you already pressed on to add into your order, then this will not get executed. So what happens here? So if it is actually in there, the transaction list will use the remove method, which is built into Python, to remove that one value. All right. And now I'm creating another string, which is called updated order. This string is empty for now. For all the items in transaction list, I'm taking not only the item, so I'm looping through all the items that I created on this list, and then I'm adding the $ with the space. So here's the manipulation that we did here. At first, to create the list, we take everything out with the $ and the space. So we're splitting it all in there. But then afterwards, now that we removed everything, we're going to put everything back together so that we can put it in the transaction label. So we're adding the $ and the space. And then we take the order transaction configuration, and then we use our text and we put our updated order in there, and we're good as new. Now, what happens here? Updated transaction total. This is very easy, guys. We do the same manipulation as in the add order button. We simply do the opposite. Instead of adding, we're actually removing, which is right here. So we take the integer value of my order total by doing some string manipulation, taking away the total and the colon and taking away the $, just having a digit as a string, casting it into an integer, removing the price of the current order, and then just reconfiguring it everything by putting all of it back together, just how we did it up there. So we're going to run our application and see what happens. All right, so I'm going to display calamari. I'm going to add to the order, remove it, remove it, remove it, remove it, and remove it. What is going on here? Now, this is where things get a little bit tricky, and I'm going to explain to you guys why you only see $ when you're removing something. And the reason is because we commented out this line of code right here, the pop function, which actually takes the transaction list that we create from our display label and then takes away the last element of the list, right? So we have the length of our transaction list -1, obviously, because we always start from 0 in computer science, and then we pop that element. This is another built-in function that you do with list manipulation. So you realize that afterwards, when we are updating our updated order, we're updating it with an item from the transaction list plus a $. The thing, however, is that when we use split, so imagine you have a list, right? And then when you use split, the last element could be the element you're splitting from. What happens here is that the list that is returned from this method will actually have one extra element because it returns always one element beyond what you're splitting with. And that's why this actually creates a transaction list that, since we're always having a $sign to split it, and that's the last element inside of our string, we're going to have one more element that is completely empty on our list. And that's why you need to pop it. You need to take it out of there, and that's how you're going to actually just no longer have a $sign. Because afterwards, you keep removing, and you keep adding a $sign, and that's the only thing that remains. And you come up with something like that, right? So I remove my fried calamari, but then the last $sign remained. And then as I click on remove, all the $signs remained. So now we're going to rerun the application. Try again with calamari. Remove, and remove. And you see there's no $sign remaining, simply because now we don't have an empty last list element. because we have this line of code right here. And that's exactly how the remove function works. So now we're going to move on to the next section of our functionality in our GUI application, and it is the order section. What can you notice here? You may notice the order button right away, but there's another functionality that is far more subtle, and it's the order ID. The order ID is composed of bin, right here, referencing to the binary, an underscore, and then having a random generated text with some letters and some numbers. This order ID is associated to every transaction that happens on your restaurant. So from what you can see, they're also the title of each receipt. So whenever I open a receipt, they all have the order ID inside of them, telling me which order was done during that day. So the customer would technically also have that order ID on their receipt when they receive it. So one thing that you can notice here is that I have this order right here, but then I decide to close shop. This is the last order of my restaurant, so I exit out, and then I rerun my restaurant the next day. What do we notice? We have a completely new order ID that is generated. This means that I'm calling a function every time I start the GUI application. And this function needs to be called at the beginning and also whenever I decide to order. What happens here? I have a brand new order ID because I'm moving on to another customer. So we're going to create the function right now for the order ID. And we will actually put it right over here within our functions and our functionality. Okay, so we created the order function, which is this one, and we're just simply gonna explain what it does. And for actually this function to work, I need to import a package, guys, and it's called the random package. And you use it a lot in Python whenever you want to generate something randomly. So we import random. Excellent. And that's a built-in package in Python. From what you can see, this is gonna go away very soon. Perfect. So def order ID. And this is actually what generates the order ID that is completely random. So we got our numbers right here and our letters. So the goal here is to have a list of numbers from 0 to 10. Actually, let's go from 0 to 9. That's a little bit easier. And letters in the alphabet. So A all the way to Z, I put them in all caps. And since our order IDs, we start with bin underscore. This is simply just from the name of our restaurants, binary, whatever. But you can start it with anything else. But we have bin underscore right here, and we have random letters and random digits. Okay, so the goal here is that we're gonna have this order ID in here, and we're gonna append things inside of this string. So we're gonna keep on adding with the string concatenation. So what we do is that for I in range of 3, because we decided that the order IDs are gonna have bin underscore, then 3 letters and 3 numbers inside of these elements. So we're going to take random letters and we're going to add a random choice within the letter list. So choice is from the random package. So what I'm doing here is that I create an empty string for random letters, and then I add onto it a random choice from my letters. So what's happening here is that at the start, we're going to get a random letter right here. It could be A, B, C, whatever. And we put it in here. Then after that, in our next pass, we're adding more and more until we get to 3 letters. On this same loop, we're doing the same thing with random digits. We have an empty string right here, but we're adding random digits in the choice of numbers. And then last but not least, we have our order ID, and we simply just concatenate 3 random letters and 3 random digits, and then we can return the order ID. And that's exactly how it works. When I generate, for example, the order section, I have right here, perfect. So we have our order section and the text order ID label, TTK label order frame, text order ID. In here, we're gonna add onto it, and we're gonna call the function update ID. Actually, it's order ID. Sorry for that. Order ID. And on this one, guys, we need the parentheses because we are returning something, right? We're not simply just referencing a command into this function. We're returning something. So we need to actually return a string to concatenate it. So in this specific scenario, you do need your parentheses. And not only that, we're going to see that in the order button, this has a type of functionality. So there you have it. We just generated it. We have 3 random letters and 3 random digits. We're going to close it again and try one more time. We're going to have a completely different order ID. Oh, and there you have it. And that's how the order ID function actually works. So you need to import the random package, 3 random letters, 3 random digits, and then you also do some string concatenation, which is some string manipulation, a fancy word to say you're just adding strings together to create one last string, and then you return it. So here we're almost at the end of the video. We're going to look at the last functionality of our GUI application. And I'm talking about the order button, which is right here. So I have a full-on order that is ready right here. I have the order ID, and I want you guys to pay attention. What exactly happens whenever I click on order? Okay, we notice 2 things. Not only did we switch the order ID, meaning that we're going on to a completely brand new order, but our total also went to $0. So let's try that again. Let's try to order one more thing. Let's try to order 2 calamaris. We're going to click on order. Perfect. Now when I close my restaurant application, what do I get? I get the 2 orders, the 2 receipts, not only showing exactly what I ordered for, the total, the time at which I did my order, and the title of my restaurant, obviously. And you have them right here. And that's exactly what the order button does. So not only does it update some label configurations in the order section, but it also generates a file that it's going to be used as a receipt. So our last function being the one that's going to generate our receipt, we're going to paste it right in here. Okay, so let's go to it. Let's go right to it and actually just dissect it. Whoops, we're going to comment this section. Okay, so region generating receipt from order button. Excellent. Right now, in order for this to work, you need to import certain things from Python. So you're going to import 2 packages. Go all the way to the top. Okay, so from the datetime package, we're importing the date, and also from the same datetime, we're importing datetime. Now I'll tell you guys what these 2 are going to do, and it's pretty much simple. It's in the name. It's going to tell you the date of today and the time of today. It's as simple as that. So what's happening here when we click on our order button? We create a new receipt, right? Why am I creating this new receipt? Is because I wanna, when I'm opening the file and putting it in write mode, I want that new receipt to be the title of my file. Well, I don't have any of them here, but that file that needs to pop up needs to have the same ID of my order, right? So I take the order ID label and I get the text out of it. And in this new receipt, since I have order ID inside of it, I'm gonna use the replace method and replace it with nothing. So meaning that whatever is remaining on this new receipt that I took away from my order ID label is actually the true order ID that we got from our order ID function that I just showed you guys. So last but not least, we're also going to do the transaction list manipulation once again, because we want to take all of our elements from our transaction and just put them line by line. So from my order transaction, I'm getting the text and splitting it with the $sign. And as I previously explained as well, you need to take away the last element of this list. Okay, so the order day is going to be the date that you just imported in here, the package. So we take date, and then from that we're going to call the method today, which will return the date of today. And then the order time, you take the date time and you call the method now. That's going to be the time from today. Excellent. So in the item in the transaction list, you're simply going to have the item and add the $sign and the space right after. Now, I know you might be a little bit confused. Why am I splitting it by that, taking it out of the equation, and then afterwards adding it? It's because that way you still need to do this manipulation, because from the order transaction, when you get the text, it's a full-on string, guys. So you still need to access each element one by one so that you can write them one line by line. It's as simple as that. So you do need to do this manipulation, but you still add the $sign right after, obviously, because we're paying money. So with open new receipt, the one we just the order ID that we just generated here, we set the mode as writing, and then file will write the title of my restaurant, skip one line, have this for styling for separation. I added there, it's really not that necessary though. Skip one line. Then we take the order day, which we created here, which is the date of today, and we format it. This %x means that it's going to be formatted to a certain specific way. It's going to look a certain way. Also unnecessary, but I just thought it looks nice. You can look at string formatting online. It's going to show you how you can format them with different combinations. You skip one line and you do the same string format for your time. Skip 2 lines. And then for each item in transaction list, and remember now these items have a $sign in them, you're simply going to write the item and skip one line. Then we skip 2 lines and we get the text from our order total label, which is going to be the total of our order, as if everything has been adding up. Last but not least, since we just ordered one transaction, we got to move on to the next one, right? So we take our order total label and reconfigure it to $0 once again, the text inside of it. And our order ID label is going to be reconfigured to have order ID, and you call once again the order ID function that we just generated. And then when we run our application, we're going to go, whoa, sorry, just went full screen. We're going to go through all the steps one more time. Order certain elements, take this one out of here, made a mistake, take this one. And now when I click on order, I realize I made a mistake. I did not put my command option inside of my button. So we're going to go right to it in here, into our order button, command, and put our callback function right there. Excellent. Let's try that one more time and run our application. Two fried calamaris. We're going to press our order button. What's going to happen? We're going to see this order ID update and my total go back to $0. And that's it. We did it. However, one last tiny element, and look at that. We have my order right in there. One last tiny element is that I forgot to update my transaction label. It needs to be empty right after. So we should actually go do that right now. So we're going to go into transaction, order transaction. Transaction right there. We're going to configure this label with our text and then just simply have an empty text. Perfect. We're going to run that one more time. All right. I'll have 2 burgers now. I press on my order button and that's exactly what we wanted. We have a new order ID, total equals to 0, and my transaction is completely empty. And as soon as I close this window, what do I see? My new file that just popped up showing that I had 2 beach burgers at this date, at this specific time, in the binary that costed me $28. And that's it for today, guys. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, put a comment, and please subscribe. I just want to thank you guys one more time for 100 subscribers, guys. I love it, and I appreciate every comment that you guys are putting out there. Have a good one, and see you soon.